The revolution that turned friends into enemies. Before 1979, Iran and Israel weren't enemies. In fact, they traded oil, military tech, and intelligence behind the scenes. Under the Shah, Iran treated Israel like a secret friend in high school, pretended not to know them in public, but still passed notes and shared answers during exams. Then came the revolution, and everything flipped. Ayatollah Khomeini overthrew the Shah and built a regime that ran on religious ideology. One of the new regime's core beliefs is that Israel had no right to exist. Khomeini didn't just criticize Israel, instead he called for its destruction and cut every diplomatic tie. In its place, Iran started funding groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and Islamic Jihad in Gaza. Some of these groups skipped the hate speeches and went straight to launching rockets. Israel, in turn, went from trading partner to permanent target. It began treating Iran as a global threat, not just because of weapons or borders, but because Iran's entire government was now built on the idea of removing Israel. This wasn't a border dispute, it became something deeper. Iran painted Israel as the West's puppet. Israel saw Iran as a rising power, trying to surround it with proxy fighters. The fallout from 1979 sparked tension. Then it kicked off a Cold War that never really ended. Iran's proxy web. When Iran wants to fight Israel, it rarely does it directly. Instead, it plays a longer game, arming and funding other groups to do the damage. These are called proxies, and Iran has a whole collection of them spread across the region, like chess pieces. The most famous one is Hezbollah. Hezbollah is not just some street gang with rockets, it's a full-blown army based in Lebanon, trained, supplied, and paid by Iran. For years, they've been the sharp end of Iran's stick, firing thousands of missiles into northern Israel and turning southern Lebanon into a launch pad. Then there's the Houthis in Yemen. They started as a local militia and turned into one of Iran's biggest wildcard threats. They've launched drones at Saudi oil fields, fired missiles at Red Sea ships, and now they've joined Iran's regional strategy by targeting Israel too. Not because they're neighbors, but because they're team players in Iran's shadow war. Iraq and Syria are packed with smaller Iranian-backed militias. These groups mostly target U.S. forces and Israeli assets from behind the scenes. Iran doesn't need to march across the borders when it can just send orders through encrypted messages and wire transfers. This web of proxy fighters gives Iran power without fingerprints. If a rocket hits Israel, Iran can deny everything. Wasn't us, they'll say, while the launchers still smell like Tehran's oil money. Why Israel hit first, and why now? By 2025, Israel was done waiting. Iran kept testing longer-range missiles, boosting its uranium stockpile, and throwing out threats like it was handing out flyers. Tehran claimed the whole time that its nuclear program was peaceful, but Israel wasn't about to gamble on that. So on June 13th, they hit first. It wasn't a warning shot, it was a lightning-fast operation called Rising Lion, and it lit up Iran's sky like a fireworks finale with consequences. Israeli jets crossed into Iranian airspace and hit dozens of high-value targets in cities like Tehran, Isfahan, and Hamadan. Not only buildings, but strategic sites, like the Natanz nuclear facility, the Iraq reactor, and the Parchin military complex. Mossad teams inside Iran added chaos on the ground. Assassinations, drone strikes, and sabotage. They reportedly killed top military officials and nuclear scientists within the first 24 hours. Iran's air defenses are mostly neutralized. Israeli planes flew in like they were visiting cousins. This wasn't just about preventing a bomb. Israel aimed to cripple Iran's military strength, rattle the regime, and send a message. We can reach you anywhere. Whether it works long-term is unclear, but Israel's bet was simple. Better a risky first strike than a mushroom cloud later. The war that actually began. Iran didn't wait long to answer. Less than 48 hours after the Rising Lion strike, Tehran launched its own operation, one that looked more like a regional earthquake than a counterattack. Drones, missiles, and suicide UAVs were fired from Iran, Iraq, Yemen, and Syria. Not just at military targets, but deep into Israeli cities like Tel Aviv and Haifa. Hundreds were injured, dozens were killed, and the Iron Dome had to intercept so many projectiles, it overheated in some areas. For the first time in decades, Israel activated full war protocols. Bomb shelters opened nationwide. Reserve forces were called up. Commercial flights stopped. It wasn't just an air war anymore. Iran's proxies kicked in hard. Hezbollah launched its largest barrage of rockets from Lebanon in history. The Houthis hit Eilat with long-range drones, and militias in Iraq started attacking U.S. US bases, hoping to drag Washington in by force. This wasn't the usual tit-for-tat, it was all-out warfare, just short of nuclear. Civilians were dying, economies stalled, the UN held emergency meetings while oil prices spiked overnight. The war had officially begun, and the world watched, hoping it wouldn't go nuclear next. Why Israel wants regime change. You won't hear regime change in speeches, but you'll see it in missile trails and broken servers. Over the years, Iranian nuclear scientists have met mysterious ends. Military convoys have exploded out of nowhere, and entire research facilities have gone dark, sometimes literally. These aren't accidents. Instead, they wanted to send a message, and the message is clear. Israel's real target isn't just the missiles, it's the entire machine behind them. The scientists, the factories, the chain of command. The logic is simple. As long as Iran's current regime is in power, Israel believes there will never be peace. Israel treats security like a lifeline, not a strategy. Without it, the country risks falling apart. The Iranian government has spent decades calling for Israel's destruction, funding enemies on every border, and pushing closer to nuclear capability. From Israel's perspective, that's not something you negotiate with. So instead of an invasion, Israel uses shadow tactics, Mossad operations, cyber attacks like the Stuxnet virus, sanctions lobbying, and now in 2025, direct strikes on government and military infrastructure, not just on reactors, but on the political heart of the regime. Some reports even suggest Israel has quietly supported dissident networks inside Iran. It's a quiet war on the regime itself, brick by brick. Israel may never say the words, but the goal is out in the open. Less uranium, fewer ayatollahs. Why Iran wants regime change. Officially, Iran says it's fighting Zionism, not Israelis. But dig a little deeper and you'll notice something. Nearly every speech, missile, and military drill seems aimed at toppling the Israeli government, not just annoying it. Tehran never says regime change, but its actions tell the story loud and clear. From funding Hezbollah to training Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Iran is waging a war of attrition, trying to drain Israel's strength from every direction. It wants Israel surrounded, stressed, and constantly under pressure, because the more unstable Israel looks, the more Iran believes it can delegitimize its existence, especially in the eyes of the Arab world. Tehran isn't chasing a single grand victory, it's playing the long game. Slow, constant pressure from every direction until something gives. Economic pressure, cyber attacks, diplomatic campaigns, and proxy conflicts, all designed to outlast, outbleed, and outmessage Israel. The attacks come slow and steady, designed to wear Israel down one breath at a time. Iran doesn't want to destroy Israel with one blast, it wants to corner it, weaken it, and let the world watch as it starts to unravel on its own. That's the plan, but so far it's still a fantasy, because Israel, for all its problems, isn't going anywhere quietly. The awkward role of the US and Trump's tightrope act. America didn't plan this war, but it's stuck in the middle of it, again. For decades, the US has been Israel's biggest military backer and Iran's loudest critic. Billions in aid, intelligence sharing, defense pacts. But by 2025, things got awkward fast. Trump's back in office, but this time he's sharing power with Senator Marco Rubio as a compromise VP pick. Rubio's old school hawkish. Trump's more about the show. Together, they tried to project strength without jumping headfirst into another war. But Iran's strikes on US bases in Iraq forced their hand. American soldiers died, air bases took hits, and suddenly neutrality wasn't an option. Washington sent carriers to the region but avoided putting boots on the ground. They ramped up air defense systems, authorized covert support for Israel, and launched a few targeted strikes against Iranian-backed militias, but still refused to call it a war. Meanwhile, Congress argued over everything. Democrats pushed for de-escalation. Republicans demanded a formal response, and Trump said that he held a press conference bragging about his approval rating while warning Iran not to test American firepower. It's a balancing act. Support Israel too loudly and risk dragging the US into another Middle Eastern war, stay too quiet, and look like a paper ally. Either way, Washington's walking on a wire and the wind is picking up. The cyber battlefield. While everyone's watching the missiles, there's another fight happening behind the scenes. Iran and Israel have been hacking each other for years, but by 2025, it wasn't just quiet background noise anymore. Hospitals, power plants, trains, suddenly everything was fair game. You don't need boots on the ground when you can crash a city with code. Iran's cyber teams hit Israel water systems, power grids, and hospital servers. One attack almost altered chemical levels in a water treatment plant, not to poison, just to prove they could. It was like ringing the doorbell just to say, "We know where you live." Israel naturally hit back harder. Their hackers took out Iranian banking systems, air traffic software, and even hijacked state TV to broadcast anti-regime messages. 1 week, Tehran's metro signs were hacked to flash "Death to the dictators." Embarrassing? Yes. Effective? Also yes. The cyber war doesn't kill instantly, but it drains trust. Civilians panic, services break, governments look weak. And since those attacks often don't leave fingerprints, they can escalate without setting off a full-blown war. It's a shadow conflict where both sides bleed a little more with each keystroke. In the age of firewalls and fiber optics, this is just another front line. Why Hezbollah sat this one out. Hezbollah is usually Iran's loudest megaphone. Whenever tensions rise, they're the first to fire rockets from Lebanon and turn northern Israel into a war zone. But this time, crickets. For a group that once bragged about being the resistance, their silence in 2025 was deafening. Part of it comes down to timing. After months of low-level conflict, Hezbollah had already lost senior commanders, dozens of fighters, and most of its ammo stockpile from earlier skirmishes. Add in the fact that Israeli drones were basically circling Lebanon like hungry hawks, and you get a group that's not eager to poke the bear again. But there's also the politics. Lebanon is barely holding itself together right now. The economy's wrecked, the government's weak, and most citizens don't want their homes turned into a battlefield just because Iran is picking fights across the region. Even Hezbollah's backers know a full-scale war could collapse the whole country. So for once, they held back. No major attacks, no sudden invasions, just a few symbolic rocket launches, mostly for show. Behind closed doors, they're still loyal to Iran, but this time loyalty had limits. Because if Hezbollah jumps in too deep, there might not be anything left to defend. Iran's proxy wars and oil sabotage. Direct war isn't always Iran's go-to move. When the risks pile up, it shifts gears and plays dirtier, and its backup plans are just as chaotic as its frontline strategy. While Israel was watching the skies, Iran turned to the seas, the pipelines, and the global economy. First stop, the Strait of Hormuz. It's a narrow waterway, but nearly a third of the world's oil moves through it. Iran threatened to block it again, and backed up the warning with sea mines and speedboat patrols. Oil tankers were attacked, some sabotaged in port. Even the threat of closure sent energy prices flying and panicked half the globe into fuel hoarding. Next came the Red Sea. Houthi rebels in Yemen, funded and trained by Iran, fired long-range missiles at shipping routes. One drone even hit a cargo vessel carrying goods from Europe to Asia. The message was clear. If Iran can't beat Israel directly, it'll choke the world's trade arteries until someone listens. Meanwhile, Iran activated sleeper cells in Iraq and Syria, hoping to stretch Israel's defenses thin and possibly bait the US into overextending. And in the background, cyber attacks continued, targeting oil companies, ports, and even satellite feeds for commercial airlines. Iran's nuclear threats. So far, Iran has walked the tightrope, pushing its nuclear program just far enough to provoke fear, but not far enough to start a world war. But what happens if they step off the rope completely? If Iran conducts a nuclear test, even a small one, deep underground, everything changes. Overnight, Iran stops being a potential threat and becomes a confirmed nuclear state. That alone could trigger a full-scale regional panic. Israel's military doctrine is built around the idea of never letting hostile countries go nuclear. A test would be taken as proof that Israel's red line was crossed, and crossed publicly. Retaliation wouldn't just be likely, it would be expected. Arab states that quietly cooperate with Israel might panic and distance themselves. The US would face pressure from both sides, some screaming for war, others demanding restraint. Meanwhile, Iran's allies might treat the test as a victory, a warning shot to the world, and maybe that's the point. Even if Iran never uses a bomb, just showing they have one could shift the balance of power. Iran uses that as leverage. For Israel, it's a nightmare scenario. The Gaza factor. Iran's not sending troops into Gaza. It's sending money, weapons, and ideology, and that's enough to turn the territory into a live wire. For years, Tehran was funneled money, weapons, and training to Palestinian groups like Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Not for peace talks, but instead for pressure. Every time things heat up in Gaza, Iran's fingerprints are somewhere in the background. In 2025, the pressure campaign got sharper. Rocket barrages from Gaza into southern Israel followed Iranian strategy more than local events. A major Israeli strike on an Iranian nuclear facility? Cue a sudden burst of missiles from Rafah. Israel knew these weren't random. Iran was using Gaza as a southern distraction. The goal is to make Israel feel surrounded. From Hezbollah in the north, to Gaza in the south, to drones flying in from Yemen, every border bleeds a little. Iran doesn't control Gaza, but it doesn't have to. Influence is cheaper than occupation, and when Hamas acts up, Iran gets to watch the chaos unfold without lifting a finger, while Israel burns through Iron Dome interceptors and public patience.